Welcome to another episode of Fatherhood, Breaking the Toxic Cycle. And we have a returning guest, and this is Ruben's come back to share his childhood and the struggles that he faced growing up and the challenges and how it helped him to persevere as he transitioned from childhood into adulthood. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
No, absolutely. The last time here we had some technical difficulties, so we lost the first part of your journey, and that was just childhood and growing up, and we were able to capture some of the tragedy that happened later on in life, which isn't the first episode. But what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and just revisit the beginning of your life, and just what life was like growing up in the barrio
Yes.
and just the struggles you face with your parents who struggled with addiction, and just your transition from childhood into gang life. So you can go and introduce yourself, and we can start off from the beginning.
Sure. Hi, my name's Ruben. The story is it's an interesting one. I lived it, but in retrospect, I think that it was lived for a purpose. Um, Growing up was tough where I came from. Um, I realized that, we don't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose the lifestyle that we're going to be growing up in. So with that being said, I think that me being born to my mom and my dad, I think that it was part of the bigger picture. Didn't see it coming. And I say that because I'm still sitting here in front of you, because the story is not done being written yet. So with that being said, growing up with a mom and a dad that, come to find out, back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, drugs were introduced into the neighborhoods, was actually kind of put there. But that's, something for people to research. But I think what happened, though, with my parents was that they fell into that. Uh, they became drug dealers. There were some of the main drug dealers on the streets at the time. They were also doing drugs, and the drug of choice, or the drug that they were selling, was PCP.
Wow.
So PCP is a heavy drug, chemicals on top of chemicals. So uh, that was kind of the lifestyle that they started living. My dad was a gang member. My mom was a gang member. My aunts were gang members. My uncles were gang members. Everybody was a part of the streets. So it's kind of what I grew up in. I and that's why I started off my story with saying it the way that I did, because I grew up in the party life. I grew up watching people get high, watching parties in my house almost day after day or every other day, because those were opportunities for sales. So have the party at your house, and you let everybody get high on your supply. So, as a little kid growing up in that lifestyle, mom and dad always had money, so we were at Knott's Berry Farm. We were at all the fun places, and we used to go to parks a lot. I kind of remember as a kid being in different parks all the time. It didn't dawn on me until I got older why we were at the public parks, because that's where all the drug deals took place. So I was a kid playing on the swings. I just knew that there was always a crowd around my mom and my dad. So,
So their choice of life by dealing drugs, you didn't lack the experiences as far as you went to the amusement parks, you got to live, but unfortunately, it was not with the, uh, money that was in good energy,
that's right.
but you did get to experience those childhood Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, and so forth.
I did, yes. And I think that that was a substitute for maybe the love I should have been receiving, the attention I should have been receiving. I think that was the substitute for that. And that was, in their eyes, um, maybe sufficient or maybe equal to that attention that maybe I was seeking at the time as a little kid.
So it's
So,
almost like they were buying your love
yes,
and what they lacked with emotional support and love, they made it up with things, which is
correct.
very common.
Yes. And me being the oldest of 5 kids or 5 siblings, I got to see my parents by themselves. So I was spoiled a lot when I was a kid, from what I was told, and kind of what I could remember somewhat. And growing up with my mom was an adventure.
Mm.
My mom was an adventure. Uh, she graduated from high school, and she had a lot of good ambitions. There's a lot of good traits and qualities about my mom. However, my mom was still attracted to those guys that were in the streets. So that kind of, put her in a place in life where she was going to be exposed to everything that comes along with those kind of guys. And Yeah. I went along for the ride because that was my mom. So fast forward, because there's a lot to talk about there in the beginning, but I'm going to go ahead and skip to the part where my mom now is faced with having a child, being pregnant, and still using PCP. So this is where life takes a big turn for our family. Um, I seen my mom growing up. I've actually found my mom's bottles. PCP comes in a bottle, and the way it's kind of used is with a cigarette. Put those together, and you got your drug. So I used to find those bottles when I was a kid, and I used to dump them out.
You knew what they were.
I knew what they were when I was probably about 6 years old, and used to dump those bottles out, get my hands smacked. I used to get hit for doing it because I'd cost my mom money,
Mm.
but I didn't know it. All I knew is that when my mom pulled that bottle out and dipped her cigarette in it, that she was going to change pretty soon, and she wasn't going to be the same person for a while. And that's all I knew as a kid, because that's kind of what it does to you. So, in fact, I'll just share real quick. I brought my mom back from an overdose one time when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. Foam coming out of her mouth, head knocked back, just drowsy, and she was incoherent. And I remember as a kid, people giving each other milk and cranberry juice to, I guess, lighten up the drug, or have them come back from overdose. So I knew as a kid to go get the milk. And I remember one time getting milk, and I'm pouring milk into my mom's mouth, and she's not drinking it, and the milk's just pouring out the side of her face. But some milk must have got in there, because I remember sitting there just quiet, just crying quietly and just waiting for her to come back around. And when she did, I remember when she opened her eyes, she was scared, and then she hugged me real tight because she knew I was the one that brought her back. And so, that was something that just hit me right now. I thought I should share because that was a pretty intense
At 7
moment.
years old.
Yeah. So, fast forward now to 2 years later now. I'm 9 years old. My mom's pregnant, and she's been trying to get rid of this baby that's in her stomach. She doesn't want it, but she won't go get an abortion neither. So she was getting high, and I'd watch her get her stomach and put her stomach over the rail, just almost trying to abort it herself while she was high on PCP. Um, I seen her do some things like that, and now comes the day where the baby has to be born, and that's my little brother. And so he's born with PCP in the system. He's a drug baby, and there's all kind of things wrong with him. CPS gets involved, of course, and at the time I was 9 years old, just became class president. I thought that, to me, I'll never forget that, because the very next day of me being class president, and I think my 4th grade class, maybe 3rd or 4th, uh, a police officer comes in to the classroom with a social worker.
Before you hit that, I just need to go back and say, so even with everything going on in your household, you still managed to become class president.
I didn't realize that, but yes, I was.
Wow. That's powerful that you're able to rise to that occasion amongst your peers,
Yeah.
even in 4th grade.
I never looked at it that way. Thank you for
Absolutely.
for mentioning it like that, because 'cause I'd never seen
No,
that before.
which is a powerful moment
Yeah.
to okay, so the police, you're in the classroom, you just became class president, you're having turmoil at home, but at school, you're having these wins.
Yes, and, education or, academics has always been something I've been interested in growing up as a kid. So I love school. And, so now walks in this big police officer with a CPS social worker, and, I remember them going to my teacher and, me in the classroom, everybody's looking at them. So she calls me up and I and
Mm,
I'm and then you gotta remember, I'm a kid growing up with street parents. So cops were bad. Cops meant look the other way, run the other way. That's how the way it was for me as a kid and what I seen growing up and what I was kind of told. So when I seen the cop and now I'm getting pulled into that to that group of adults, I'm scared. I'm saying, what's going on? What did I do? And my teacher hugs me with tears in her eyes, and she just says, you go with them, that they're here for you and they're gonna take care of you." And that's all she really could say to me, I guess, under the circumstances. Mrs. Lee, she was a good teacher. I remember her. So, now I'm going into the main office. I got the social worker talking to me in my ear, but I really don't hear her. I'm more concerned about the police officer. So I get to the main office and I see my little brother sitting in the main office. And so if I'm 9, I think my little brother was about 6. And he's crying. He's crying. And so he sees me and he comes and runs up to me and hugs me. And he was scared. And I told him, I said, it's gonna be okay. I consoled my little brother. And so I kept him under my arm. So um after consoling my little brother, that's when the social worker tells us that we're not gonna be going home from school that day. And she also explained that we were gonna be going back to the house and that we were gonna be picking up my other 2 siblings that were in the house. So, I was probably in shock because I didn't cry right away. I remember I wasn't crying. Probably didn't know how. Probably was detached emotionally. So we go back and as we're going down the driveway, I see my mom hogtied on the floor. So if those that don't understand what hogtie is hands behind your back, legs behind your back, and you're strapped, just hogtied. And she was kicking and screaming, and I can see that there was 2 other police officers there, and both had my other 2 siblings in their hands. And I'm sitting in the back of the police car. I'm not letting they're not letting me and my brother out. And so, um, after they put us all into the car, I get my other brothers, and I'm consoling everybody. Still to this point, I haven't showed any emotion yet. And so now at this point, it's just being strong for my siblings, just being strong for them. So I figured if I showed that I was tough, that they would toughen up a little bit. And so now we have to go drop everybody off. So we leave the scene of my mom. We leave the driveway with my mom hogtied and cops standing around her. And now we have to get dropped off in different foster homes. And so they dropped off my little brother. They dropped off my sister, my second brother together. And so I think after they dropped them off, that's when I started crying. That's when I let all my emotion out. and, now I had to go to my foster home. So by the time I got to my foster home, it was already dark, and I can remember it just like me going into this place, and so I went to a foster home where there were other kids there too. So this lady was a foster parent for a living. And so I was there for I was it was hard being there. I was scared. I was scared, kind of lonely at night, didn't know nobody. Um Forced to eat stuff I wasn't used to. You know what I mean? It was it was a huge transition for a kid to go through. But my life up to that point prepared me for that. And I can only say that now, looking back, because of my mom and my dad being drug dealers. We always had to move. So guess what that left me to do? Go from school to school. So I went to a lot of schools, getting moved around. Even sometimes coming back to the same school, a couple years later. Anyways, I'm saying that though because all that moving around, it kind of prepared me how to be around new people, how to adapt to a new environment, how to keep myself composed through it all. So now I'm living in foster homes, and now I have to go see a psychiatrist who's trying to pick my brain and trying to figure out what's going on in my head all the time. I got a foster parent that's always putting my mom down, saying my mom's, a piece of this and a piece of that. And, she don't love me or else she would have got me back by now. Things like that. A lot of, she was a good lady as far as, physically taking care of us, but she was also emotionally damaging.
I hope you're enjoying this week's episode of Fatherhood Voices, Breaking the Toxic Cycle. Now, we have a special gift for you. If you're enjoying the episode, you can go ahead and go to edwardrodardi.com/toolbox, and you can go ahead and request a summary of the podcast. Now, the neat thing about this is not only does it have the key takeaways and it gets straight to the core of the message of the podcast, but it also gives you some great takeaways along with some exercises that you can start to do in order to heal and rebuild the relationship with your children. So that right there definitely damaged you emotionally, psychologically, because you're there to be in a safe space and she's providing physically for you. But from an emotional perspective, she's just continuing to feed you that chaos, which is and it's causing confusion. And that's important to know because there's a lot of foster parents out there, and we want to make sure that they know that they're not contributing to the chaos that already exists. And
Yeah,
sometimes they may be trying to do it with good intentions, but it could come off totally. You're a child, so you're still processing. So
definitely.
that's a you know
And, thank you for dropping that seed in my head to say that there are possibly can be foster parents that could be listening to this. And I'm gonna be a foster parent. That's happening. That's in my future because that's where my heart's at. I know what it feels like to be one of those foster kids. I know what it feels like to be taken or even ripped from your family and having to deal with your emotions and having to deal with your feelings with total strangers and having to learn how to adapt to a life that I mean, you're alone.
So let me touch on that. Just for foster parents that will stumble on this episode. As a 9-year-old child and then now in the foster system, what are some things that you look back on, maybe you haven't thought about, but now looking back on, that they could have done to maybe ease the pain or the difficulty as you were going through this transition? What are some things you think they might have been able to done to just help you?
Wow, it's deep. The first thing that came to mind when you said that was I think when a child is taken from their parents, I think no matter how old they are, they understand that something's not right. They understand that somebody's maybe at fault even. And if they're old enough, they have the details as to what happened and why they are where they are, right? If I can advise foster parents, if you really want to do justice to these children for a situation that they didn't put themselves into. And that was the hate that I carried with my mom a lot, was that I didn't do this to myself. I didn't put myself here. You messed up. You did something wrong. Why do I have to get away from my family? Why do I have to go somewhere else? Why do I have to be with people that I don't know? So I'm dealing with those underlying anger issues as I'm going through the foster system as well.
Right.
So for foster parents, what I, want to say is that a child already knows why they're there. A child already knows that their mom's not right or that their dad is not around. A child already knows that. They don't need to be reminded. So, uh, even in times of anger and frustration at a foster kid, the best thing to do is to not throw their past or why they're there in their face. That's probably the best thing that you can do, is to stay away from that. And I think just that alone is going to open up the door for maybe down the road healing, because sometimes you can't heal a child that's in the midst of chaos. You can't heal them right there and then. Only person I know could do that, to truth, to this day, is the same person that helped me change my life. And I always give glory to God for that one. He gets respect for that one. So there's some things that we as human beings can't heal in another human being. Sometimes that's left for something greater than us to take place.
Wow.
So,
So, how long were you in the foster care system? And did your parents try to get you back, or what did that look like?
well, interestingly enough, I had a couple conversations with my mom since then. And one of the conversations, I asked her, I said, "Mom, I never really asked you, while we were gone, where did you live?" I'm an adult now, so I never knew where she lived. And she said that she had met a lot of friends during that time, and that she was staying from place to place, that she really didn't have a home. I said, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." And so I asked my mom another question. I said, "Mom, while I was in the foster home, you have your kids everywhere. How did you get around when you didn't have a car? How were you able to come visit us?" My mom hitchhiked to every visit, and I didn't know that. So that gave me some words, that gave me a little bit of compassion for her, to say that she was just so stuck in life that she didn't have a car and she didn't have nowhere to go, and her kids were taken away from her. And here she is stuck on drugs and trying to, figure out where she's at in life.
So, even though the system took her children from her, and even though she was messed up with the drugs and the street life, she still had that motherly instinct to go and visit her children.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And I think that's the reason why I still choose to know her, to be honest. It took a long time to get over that one though. Probably not until my mid-30s before I finally forgave my mom fully, but back being in the foster home, I think the other thing that I started developing was this anger, this undertoned anger. It started coming up, and now kids are making fun of me in school because they find out I'm a foster kid. So, all whatever jokes come along, whatever teasing comes along with that, I probably had all that. So, well, was I bullied in school? Yeah, I was bullied in school growing up. Did I fight? I did, because that's just what I knew how to do. S
So, let me touch on that. So, what message could you give teachers
oh,
that now are dealing with kids that are in foster homes or group homes, and then the subject of bullying, because bullying's a big problem right now in this day and age, and in the past also, but even more so with social media and so forth. So, what could a teacher have done to help minimize the bullying?
interestingly enough, I'm about to be a teacher. So, uh, I say that because now I understand what that job consists of. And so I think from that perspective right now, when, if I'm gonna give some kind of advice on in that area, I would say if you know that your student, one of your students is a foster kid, uh, me personally, I would I would acknowledge to them that I know, so that there's no elephant in the room with this child. Just let them know that you know, and let them know that they're safe, and let them know that they're not alone. Because I think that's the biggest thing a foster kid goes through is loneliness and depression, because your support system is gone. Your support system is no longer around you. So if a teacher could understand that they need to rebuild their support system in their new environment, then be a part of that support system.
That's powerful. That's deep.
Yeah.
Hey. So now
So
you're in the foster care system, and how long
yes.
did that last?
Well, 3 years, and that was the first home, and I was there probably the majority of the time. But I think after a while, that foster mother couldn't handle me no more, I guess, in some way. Her mouth was getting too much for me. Now I'm snapping back at her. Now she's rousing me up and riling me up to lash back every time she called my mom a name, or my mom, which was supposed to be there to visit me and would not show up or not be there, and then, start putting her down in front of me. And it's like I already felt bad because my mom didn't show up, but now you're talking about my mom on top of that. So those are the after that, that started getting old. And I told my social worker about it, and it didn't stop. So I think it was time for me to go to another foster home. And that foster home, I was there for probably about 3 months before they abandoned me. I got abandoned by foster parents. Yeah, that happened.
Wow.
They went to Arizona, left me with my mom's cousin for the weekend, did a weekend visit, and they never came back. Went to
Wow.
Arizona,
They
never
literally
came back.
abandoned
They
you.
literally abandoned me. They never came back. So my mom's cousin was kind of like pressured to foster me for a little bit, but I don't know if my mom thought just because they were family that she can now come around whenever she wants, and
Mm,
so what she was doing was she was showing up, and I was happy that she would show up, but now she's showing up, and she's showing up high.
mm.
She's showing up on PCP. And so I'm like, I didn't, at that point, I was just hating my mom. I just had no respect for her. Didn't care. And I think it started showing. My dress started changing. Started putting on those street clothes. Started talking differently, getting more influenced by the streets, because I think that was my outlet. That was my outlet for all the anger I had inside. So yeah, they gave me up, and they said, "Well, we can't keep him here no more." So that was my third foster home. So now my social worker says, "We're going to put you in a boys' home. And after a boys' home, you're going to go to McLaren Hall, which is juvenile hall, kind of bad kids." And at the time, I'm 11 years old. So you could do whatever you want to me at this point. I'm already I'm already broken inside. Everything's broken. Guards are up. So, I ended up going to the boys' home, and I was in the boys' home from 11, yeah, almost 11, just gonna about to turn 12 when my mom finally gets us back, right before I was gonna go to group homes. So there's a thing when you're a foster kid, you know how that system works. You go from the foster homes to the boys' homes, and then you go to the group homes. And then after that, they release you into the world, you know? So,
Let me ask you a question.
yeah.
So the bullying was started because you were a foster kid,
Hmm.
and then you started seeking out a negative influence. So the gangs, the street life.
Yeah.
Was that because you were bullied? What drew you to that? I know, of course, it's come from the street life, so it was your comfort. It was all you knew. But what caused that connection that you're like, it was it, I don't want to be bullied anymore, so I'm gonna go and link up with the people that aren't getting bullied, or how did that happen? We started that transition.
Well, first of all, just being what's the word I'm looking for? Not influenced, but just where it's shown to me. This lifestyle has been shown to me since I was a kid. I seen a lot of mean guys growing up, a lot of crazy guys, a lot of I've seen a lot of things happen in front of me. So I knew that there was a lot of violence already there. And I think with the anger that I had building up inside me, I think it was all just gearing me towards that way. It was inevitable. It was going to happen.
It was your community, it was your
It
tribe,
was.
like,
Yes.
this is what I need to be a part of because
Yeah.
this is
You know, it's interesting though because when I was in the boys' home, uh, got in a couple of fights while I was there with other kids that were there too. And every time I get in a fight, they put me in a straitjacket. They put me in a straitjacket and they put me in a padded room like I was crazy. And so I played the role. So every time I got in a fight and I had to walk across the whole field to get to that room, I already knew. So I'm halfway there, I'm already turning like I'm already flipping the switch off or flipping the
wow.
switch. And by the time I get there and I'm in a straitjacket, I'm bouncing off the walls and I'm just hurting myself now, just bouncing off walls and thinking, so this is what a crazy person feels like. And so I ended up in that straitjacket like 2 or 3 times. And then my mom finally then my mom actually gets us back finally. And I'm on and when she gets us back, uh I go straight to the streets. Yeah. And that's where everything else starts happening about, me growing up, me seeing death, at 12 years old.
So what does it mean you go to the streets? So for the people that don't understand
Oh yeah.
the gang life, what does
Yeah.
that mean? I went straight to the streets.
Well, eh, I had some friends that were that I knew before I went to the foster homes. So when I came back, they were kind of already they had their group of friends that they knew. So I kind of seen them. They introduced me to their friends. And so that's how the way I started picking and choosing the guys I wanted to hang around with. That's
Mhm.
kind of how the way it happened. And I think I was only 3 months, 4 months after my mom got me back from foster care. That's when I went to jail for murder.
You got jumped in?
I got jumped in.
Yeah. And then
I
3
did.
months later, you went to jail for murder.
Yes. 3 months after that. Yeah, because I believe I got jumped into to my gang when I was 12 years old. And I was probably only back with my mom probably about 2 months. So
And then
everything happened fast from getting jumped in to stealing cars and started going. And I'm only 12 doing this. And everybody has always been older than me, my friends, 15, 16. So yeah, and that's kind of how the way that all happened. Next thing you know, I'm not there no more. So actually, my siblings came back from foster care while I was fighting a murder case in juvenile hall. Yeah.
do you want to touch on that a little bit or do you rather just leave it and
Um.
go on to something else?
Well, I mean, it's part of the story. Um. That was a interesting night. I
12 years old.
12 years old. Yeah. Uh. Without touching on so many detail because it's a story.
Yes.
Is that I witnessed my first dead body, really, seeing somebody get killed in front of me. So that left me scarred for a while. And then going through the court case and going through the trial and all that. I used to get a lot of professionals come into the jail to come see me because I was the youngest
Suspect
murder suspect
in the
that was
history of LA
at that
County.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people were interviewing me, trying to pick my brain, trying to find out what makes this kid tick, what happened when, and so, yeah,
Wow.
that's kind of, and to be that kid and to have that upbringing and to sit here now in front of you, to be able to reflect on it, it's definitely a one for a book
Mm.
for sure. And, I'm appreciative right now that I still have all my senses and I still, because I did drugs myself and I got caught up in the lifestyle. However, I get to sit here now. I'm blessed. I want to help people, and I have that state of mind. And there's, all those rough edges that I grew up with, they're not there no more. I don't want them there no more. And it took a while though for me to get to this state of mind though to be at the peace that I'm at right now. Um, and for those that heard the first podcast of me having my son murdered and having to be on the phone with them right before it happened and all that, that's all part of the big story, of what's going on in my life. But I'm able to share it with others. I was able to process things along the way. I was able to understand the transitions that were taking place in my mind. And I could appreciate God for that. I'm a technician at heart. That's what I do. So I got to figure things out. Mm. I try to figure out people's angles or, the mentality, what I was going through some of these changes. And so I feel pretty good right now in saying that, I'm 45 years old. I'm about to be a teacher, and I get to mm, do something in my life that's helping others learn. And being here with you on this podcast, my life is hopefully going to be able to help somebody understand where they're at, maybe even get them down the road of healing within themselves. For the people that are helping foster kids or are involved in a foster child's life, I would say, hopefully this helps you understand where those kids are at, because a lot of the times they're closed up. They're not going to share their feelings and emotions. So I'm grateful.
Wow. And we're gonna definitely close with your story from the successes you're having. Now just going back to that gangbanging lifestyle.
Yeah.
So you saw murder,
Yeah,
you saw drug dealing,
it did.
extortion,
Yes.
robbery,
Yes.
drug use,
Yes.
kidnappings.
Yes.
Okay. So you saw it all.
Yeah,
So you come back and then you beat this murder conviction. You beat the charge. You
I
beat the
did.
case.
I did.
And tell us now coming back, and now you've got street credibility. So you're 12 years old.
Yes.
You've just beat a murder rap,
Yes.
and now you're back on the streets, and you've just elevated to a whole nother level.
Yes. And, it's interesting that you put it that way, because a lot of people probably would not see it that way, but that's that mentality, that only certain people can grab from that kind of a story, only because, maybe you're familiar or, you know, maybe kind of been there yourself. But yes, that's what it was. And, the way I beat that murder case was simply because my my best friend at the time, my homeboy, he came into my trial, and he pretty much told them that I had nothing to do with it. Told the truth is what he did. And by telling the truth, that's what set me free. The truth set me free,
Should set you
because
free.
that's what it was. Him telling the truth. And we didn't know, my lawyers didn't know if he was going to do that or not. But he had already taken a plea bargain. And so after he took his plea bargain, now my trial comes along, and so I come back into the courtroom, and I see my mom crying, my dad crying, everybody, my lawyer looks, his eyes are wide open and he's excited. And so I'm telling my lawyer what's going on. He's telling me to stay quiet. So after it's all said and done, he tells me they just dropped the murder case, and they just dropped everything that was associated with that murder case, which is all the time I was looking at. I was looking at 25 to life, and I was 12. So I really thought I was going to go do prison time. But you know what? Real quick, I'll touch on that, because that was at 11 years old when I told you I was in the boy zone, and I was going through that stage in my life. I came up with a plan, and the plan was I had to do something strong enough to get myself to prison, so I can go get with a certain group of guys that called the shots in the prisons and on the streets. And I wanted to be one of those guys. And I was hoping My goal was to be that by the time I was 18 years old. I wanted to be one of those guys. And I was definitely going down that road, and I was making my way there. But that all came from the environment that I grew up in. So yeah, interesting, huh?
And you still had so even as a young child, you crafted these goals, maybe not in the what society expects, but you already had a plan. You wanted to be the CEO of this prison gang,
Yeah,
of this organization, where other kids are looking to be police officers and
correct.
doctors and firefighters. You were like, well, if this is the cards that life has handed me, then I've got this plan in place. I've got to go ahead and make the movidas in order to get
Yes.
to that next level. And then from such a young age, the likelihood is it probably would have happened because you're so young, you're going to be able to put in the work in order to elevate it to that place of power and authority at a young age.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So I'm glad though. I'm glad that my life took the turns that it took. I'm still fortunate that I was able to meet a lot of good people along the way. I don't knock anybody. I don't even knock my life for the way that it went, only because of where I'm at today and the gratitude that I have. Just I get to reflect on a lot of memories, a lot of different stories, a lot of different events, and just they make me that much more grateful to be here today.
So facing 25 years to life and you beat the case, you're let back out onto the streets. You still didn't have your awakening with that wasn't enough. Usually people would be scared straight at that point because their life is over. So you get out, but you continue on this path for the next couple of years. So I'm curious to find out a little bit more about that and then when you finally had your awakening.
Oh wow, yeah. Um, well, coming out. My goodness, when I got out, like you said, it was that high. It was a high that I came out to, because there was a sense of I beat this murder case. Everybody's gonna look at me differently and treat me differently, and so I started carrying myself in that place, in that character. And that's where I had found myself in junior high school, just being praised by a lot of other little gang members around me. And it was a good feeling at the time, because all I knew up to that point was hurt, destruction, abandonment, pain. So now I'm getting recognized. Now people are looking at me in admiration, or, looking at me like, oh, this guy is cool. So all that did really was fuel me.
The ego,
The ego, the ego.
there's power,
Oh my
there's
goodness.
girls.
Yes. All that came along. And so being a kid, I still, and, I'll be transparent. I was still probably even a virgin, getting out from doing time and being that rough guy. So, needless to say that when I got out, I wasn't that no more,
Hmm.
but, uh, this is why that lifestyle was so glamorous to me, because it almost felt like it gave me gifts. For every bad thing that I was doing, people were recognizing it, liking it, or saying how cool it was, or, you know, uh, just being that person. It did something to me, and it made me crave it more. So all the bad things that I caught myself doing and being a part of, it was all fueled from when I was younger, trying to get that acceptance again, that being put on a pedestal, or, being made to feel something more than what I really was. Yeah.
So you're 16 now
Yes.
and you have a girlfriend? Or was
Yes.
it?
So well, so actually, I was 13, because
Okay,
now
13.
I'm 14, and I met Andrew's mom, my oldest son,
Okay.
and she was in a girls' home going to junior high.
Mm.
So when I found out she was in a girls' home, that just attracted me to her, only because she was just as broken as I was.
So the broken seek the broken.
Yep. And I didn't know it then, but I'm learning that now, that, frequencies and vibrations, That's something to look into, because it lets me know why I have certain relationships with certain people now, or people that I did, and why I was attracting certain people in my life.
Mm.
Now the people that I'm attracting in my life these years, a lot different, because of that energy, that wavelength, or that wave, that vibration. But um, I just lost train of thought.
No, that's okay. So you
Sorry.
meet her, you meet Andrew's
Oh
mom,
yeah, her.
and so now you start this wild love affair. You came from group home, she came from
Yes,
group home. There's a lot of
there
similarities, a
is.
lot of
Yes,
chaos and gang life, and
yes, because she's in a gang too,
yeah.
and so
Same gang.
different gangs.
Did they get
It,
along?
it, it was an East LA gang
But they
that
get along?
we actually did get along with their
Okay,
gang. Yeah, we
because
did.
sometimes they don't get along and it
Yeah,
causes
that's true.
conflict.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. But no, we did get along. And so what happened was she ends up running away from her foster for not her foster, from her girls' home, the home that she was in. So I tell my mom that she's out in the street. So my mom lets her come and live with us.
or-
And I'm 14 and she's 15. And so, you just got to put us together for about a week or two, and she got pregnant. Yeah.
wow,
So I got her pregnant when I was 14.
wow.
And my son Andrew, he was born on my 15th birthday.
Oh, okay, so I we have to revisit the story again
Yeah.
of a
It's okay. Go ahead. Guide me.
couple months ago before your son's born in December, and I want you to take us to that night a couple months before, and where tragedy happened for your best friend. Um, take us back there so you can kind of set the story for how Andrew became Andrew and so forth. So you're at
Wow.
your home, and your best friend comes over to spend the night, and he idolized you.
Yeah.
And he wasn't really into the gang life. He had good parents, but he just looked up to you.
Yeah.
So he's at your house spending the night.
Spending the night. We're at our house in the area that I lived in. I knew everybody around there. So Andrew's mom's probably about at the time maybe 4 or 5 months pregnant with Andrew. And so we're talking about how my best friend, his name is Andrew too. So he was gonna be his Nino. He was gonna baptize him, he was gonna be the godfather. We all talked about it. As we're talking about this or having this conversation, we hear gunshots outside.
So you're having this conversation, like literally having this
Yeah,
conversation at your house.
yeah,
14 years old, you're going to be the godfather to my son.
yes. And so I had Andrew's mom there, and then I have a cousin, Darlene, that was there, who was really in love with my best friend Andrew.
Mm.
So it was the four of us. And so we hear gunshots, and I say, I'll be right back. And he said, nah, man, why are you going out there for? There's no need for us to go out there. I said, well, you can stay right here. I'll be right back. And I end up taking off, but being my best friend, he wasn't going to let me go out there by myself. And he ended up coming with me. So we see some kids. At the time I'm a kid too, but we see some guys across the street. One of them's limping, and there's three. So I go up to him and I say, "Where you guys from?" And they told me where they were from. I told them where I was from. Our gangs got along. So I asked what happened. He said a car came by, drove by, and shot at them, and one of them got shot in the foot. So I said, "Do you know where you're at?" And they said, "Nah." So now, I have my homeboy, my friend Andrew's behind me. So there happened to be a fire station up the street. So being that they didn't know where they were at, and at that point, they weren't a threat to me, I wasn't a threat to them, and somebody needed help. So even then, I had a heart. Said, okay, well, we're gonna walk you to the corner. There's a fire station up the street. As we're walking to the corner, the car that drove by and shot them went around the corner and came back. And when they came back, this time, me and my best friend, within that 5 minute span, we end up in their group with them. And now we hit the corner and I'm showing them where the fire station is across the street. My best friend, Andrew, he ends up asking the guy that got shot, "Hey, can I see where you got shot?" So I tell Andrew, I said, "Come on, man." I said, "Don't worry about that. We got to, let's get back." And I go to turn around. And when I turn around, that's when it just gunfire. They let off about 25 rounds, and so, that's all I heard was pop, 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 pop 25 times. I remember falling to the ground, and I remember, there was concrete. They had a when I got to the hospital, they I had my eyes were all red because concrete was going to my eyes from the bullets ricocheting off the concrete. So they were trying to headhunt me is what I come to realize. By that time, I felt didn't know it yet, but I got shot in both of my legs, and so that's why, and I tried to stand up. That's why I knew I got shot because I couldn't stand up. My adrenaline didn't even let me feel the pain yet. I look over my shoulder and see on the floor, and I see my best friend in a fetal position, and he's holding his face, and one of the guys are over him, and he tells me, "Hey, man, your best he's not good, man. He got shot in the face." And he was he was moaning. He was, and then he wasn't really moving that much. And so, that's kind of how the way that happened. He ends up, and there's more to that story. Well, I got to say that I got to share this part.
You have to, yes.
Yeah, I got to. So after that happens, I end up going to one hospital. I go to the general hospital. He goes to another hospital. And his parents show up at my hospital. And his mom and dad walk in, and when his mom sees me, his mom faints, just falls on the floor. The nurses came around her and everything, and so the dad comes to me and says, "Hey, Ruben, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay." His name was Buck. "I'm okay, Buck." And he goes, "Hey, listen, they told us that both of you guys got shot, and that one of you guys were in critical condition, and they said that the one that was in critical condition is at the other hospital, and they said that that was you." And now I understood why his mom fainted, because they thought they were expecting to see their son laying right there, okay. But then it was at that point that she realized that her son was not going to make it in the other hospital, and that's why she fainted. So, yeah, that was a hard one. That was a hard one, and I had to be in the hospital for about 3 weeks. So I didn't really know what was going on with him. I didn't know how serious he was or nothing. Then I found out that he died. So, that was hard, and I was in the hospital. Uh, so I get out, and I had to be on a walker. Took me a while to heal from that, but being around his mom, at first it was her. I was consoling her. We used to wear the same clothes, me and him. We used to, borrow each other's clothes all the time. So she see me in some clothes that she's used to seeing him too, and it would just break her down. But I found myself staying right there with her until one day. I think it started to turn into more of, why are you here and not my son? And that was their only kid. He was the only child for her and her husband. So, I think that was probably like one of the last. I think, it didn't happen right away. That part of it coming out where she starts to get a little angry about her son not being there and me still alive. But when it happened, I just kind of stopped talking, stopped trying to reach out.
Have you ever, I'm sure this is replayed over and over in your mind throughout the years.
Mm.
Have you ever forgiven yourself?
No, not yet. Still working on that, bro. I carry a lot of guilt. Um, you know, and that's why I named my son after my best friend. My best friend died in um that same year my son was born. So I named my son Andrew. And yeah. So I carry the guilt of having my friend die that night. I carry that guilt. And then when my son died, my son Andrew, when he died, you know, I carry that guilt too. Because hmm, wow. Um, I feel like I let them both into a lifestyle that was that was my destiny. This is the way that I'm going, and I let these guys down. These guys that I cared about, I let them down a road to destruction that ultimately took their life. And my son, he was my best friend. He was my son. He was my brother because I was 15. So he was a lot more to me than just my son. So when they took him from me, they took a lot more than just a child. And I still deal with that. I'm learning. I'm learning how to find healing in that area. It's gonna come for me one day where I can completely be okay. So, but right now, I got good people around me. I got a good support system, and I think with that alone, uh, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. But not only am I just gonna make it, but the people around me are gonna make it. People in my community are gonna make it because I'm on a mission now, and I wanted to hurt people behind my son's death. I wanted to go get those guys that took my son's life, and I know and I'm capable of it if I really want to do it. But I don't want to see somebody go through what I went through behind my son's death. Another parent crying over their kid, and I still deal with it. I still deal with it. It pops up, but as time goes on, I'm looking now to get that energy and put that energy somewhere else. So now that I'm starting my business and on top of being a teacher, I got my business going and now I got my logo that I'm going to put together. And my logo is going to be my son. It's going to be a cartoon character of my son, uh, you know, just smiling. And that's how the way I'm going to, and that's how I'm going to turn that around.
You
So
can
that's
honor
kind
his
of,
legacy.
yeah, my honor's legacy.
Wow.
And we're going to move forward in positivity.
And I want to go to that moment when you went to go seek revenge because it's a powerful story.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're going to go back to where the change happens. So you're in a fit of rage because not only your son, but your homeboy has just lost his life.
Yes.
And you know who did it because you know where it happened at. So, and then also you're angry not only at the people that did it, but you're angry at the neighborhood because they should have protected him.
Yes.
And so you're going out seeking justice, but every time it's just not connecting. They see you,
Yes.
you're trying to do it in stealth, but it's not happening. So go through that story because the power of him coming to you is something that
Yeah.
is
Yeah, that was powerful, bro. That was a powerful moment when it happened. Um, so much so that it changed my whole direction. But my son got murdered on December 21st, 2020, just 4 days before Christmas. We had just had our birthday. Our birthday's December 6th, and we share the same birthday, so we had just shared our birthday. And so when he calls me that night and tells me that he's stuck and that these guys are looking at him and all this, it riled me up. I was scared for my son. I was angry. I was a lot. I was a lot of different things. But I decided that I was gonna go back and I was gonna retaliate just the way I know how. And so I tried a couple times to go back and go down that road because in my world or in that world, that's what you do. In that world, that's how you respond. And so I had to take myself back into that old mentality. I had to pull that guy out that I put away. I put him in a cage and I had to, and I was getting ready to let that guy out because of my actions. Now, did I ever let that guy out? I think if I would have, I wouldn't be right here talking to you if I completely let that guy out. I would have followed through on everything that was supposed to happen. I probably would have got my life taken or I would have probably been gone for life. One of the two was going to happen.
so you cage that animal inside of you for
Yes.
about 20, 25 years. And then now tragedy happens and your life was good. You were like, so traveling the world. You had started your career with, and now you're having to go back and revisit this person you put in a cage at an early age.
Yeah.
And now he's coming back to surface to
Yeah.
administer street justice.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. The way you say it is it makes me think. But that was the reality of it though. That's what was going on. And so this last time I went 3 different times, but this last time, I had people in sight. I already knew what I was gonna do, and the presence that ended up bringing themselves there at the right time. I say it now at the right time because it stopped me, and of course that was the authorities passing by, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not gonna do this right in front of them, and it forced me to redirect myself basically. And when I redirected myself, I remember crying because up to that point, I still nobody hadn't done nothing for him. I'm trying to, and I can't even get to it, but that's not my destiny. And I come to realize that because as I'm driving back, I hear my son. I kind of hear my son in my real distinctly. I mean, a voice, an inner voice though, that basically was saying to me, and that was my son because I remember him saying to me, Dad, don't do this. Don't do if you spill blood, if you spill anybody's blood behind my death, you're gonna damn the both of us. And I had I and I've always with my son growing up felt like he was our birthdays being on the same day, just everything we're connected spiritually a, a lot more closer than I think what people know, and even what I probably even knew. So he is a part of me. There's something that's special there. And when I heard that, the love for my son and the love, and because if I had time, I would tell you what I think about what happened that night and why my son's spirit got saved, why my son's spirit was spared. Because I believe, I believe a certain thing took place in that spirit world that night. So when I heard that, on top of what I already had, whatever belief I had and what took place spiritually that night, I said, okay, you know what? This is real because we're connected. And you know what, mijo? If I follow through on this and you're right, okay, then you know what? For you, just because it's like I'm just believing this inner voice. And was that inner voice that made me say, okay, all right, this is not the way to do it. And I had to force myself to leave it alone. And I still got people right now saying, we're just waiting for you. We're waiting for you to say something, what you want to do. And I haven't said nothing. And I really believe it's because there's really nothing I want nobody to do.
And you've struggled with the challenges of it and still,
Definitely.
and there's been a roller coaster of a ride of just coping with it because I honestly feel that when we have the ability to control life, which everybody does, but when you are in that state
Yeah.
that you can take a life with no regard, there's more of a struggle because you know the capacity of what you're capable of
Yeah.
versus someone that says, oh, I want to hurt you and you think about it, but you know you won't follow through. But when you know you can follow through
Yeah.
and you will go through with it, it hurts more.
Yeah.
It's more damaging. I think it's more psychologically damaging and traumatizing because you know at any minute you could do it, but just holding back and not doing it, it's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, it's more painful because I've been there with you
Wow.
and I know how much of a struggle that is to know that someone's taken your child and hurt you and you know you can administer justice, but now you're holding back that rage inside. How do you
Man.
cope with that?
Well, bro, just hearing you say that right now, you just put like I got this thing in my chest right now because man, your words are powerful and and the way that you just put that, at least in my ears, because man, that's exactly how the way a person feels inside, bro. And that's exactly what I was going through. And keep in mind that I still have other boys. I still have other boys, and I got so lost in my oldest son's death that I had to let my other kids know that, I would have done I would be doing the same thing for you. So don't judge me about what I'm doing. Don't try to stop me. For those that were seeing what I was doing, my boys, the ones that were seeing what I was doing, they were trying to talk me out of it, or they would try to say something. And but they knew that they really couldn't say nothing to me. But that night that my son spoke to me, and I felt that, and that was real strong. I think it allowed me to be it allowed me to release a little bit, just to be a dad again to my other boys, because I lost that. I lost my position as a guide, as a coach, as everything that I was to them. Wow. Yeah.
What advice would you offer fathers that are going through this? Because this happens
Yeah.
every day in society. And someone that's gone through what you're going through, experienced the loss of a son through gang violence,
Yes.
or any tragedy to lose your son, but especially gang violence or being murdered. What advice would you offer them now, looking back in retrospect?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, there is violence out there, and there is people that are gonna bring harm, and we try to hope that it don't come our way, and we want to believe that it's never gonna affect those in our own family, in our own circles. And all I can say though is that when tragedy does hit home, the one thing that I did was I blamed God first of all, and this is your fault. What happened to your protection? What happened to this and that? But then, that turned around real quick, because I'm looking at, lifestyles and choices, because that's kind of how the way we put ourselves in situations, right? So with all that being said, I think that for the father that has a son right now that is struggling with the streets, that's struggling with drugs, that's struggling with his identity, and you're dad, and you're looking at him, and you want to try to help him, and you don't even have the words to say, you don't know how to approach him. I would say at some point you just gotta let go of your own fear and your own insecurities and your own hangups as a man, and you almost got to get in touch with your feminine side, even to break down the wall that doesn't allow you to ask your son those questions, that is going to take him from the state of mind that he's in and bring him into a better one. That's probably the best way that I can put that.
Powerful. As we start to wrap up this segment, I just want to revisit two last things. The first thing is that moment when your son's born and now you have custody of him, and now you're a gangster
Yeah.
with a baby bottle
Yeah.
and a diaper in two separate pockets, probably a gun or knife in your back pocket.
Probably.
Um, and that moment where you just had this awakening that this life wasn't for me anymore.
Yeah, and that was probably about the time that I was about 16 years old. So the reason why I even got my son back, and I'm always going to give glory where glory is supposed to be given. I give credit to God for that one. Because, when I got touched in church, when and again, this falls into the other story that we had discussed on the first episode. But when I got saved again, that was a feeling I never felt before. Never felt the presence I felt, never felt the release that I felt. And I wanted to know what that was.
So how old were you? And then what happened? So you're at church,
Yes.
you're 15, 16?
16.
Okay, 16.
Yes.
So the one thing that your parents always did is they always took you to church.
Yes.
So even with this chaotic life, you always went to church on Sundays.
I would like to say that I always went to
Okay.
church on Sundays, but I always knew that there was church, and I would try to make it depending on where my life was at that time. So, for the most part, though, God has and church has been a part of my life, here and there, being brought up by my mom, who was a Christian. So, um,
So you go to church one day, it's just
yes,
another
another
day of going to
day.
church,
I
just
think I must have accepted Jesus in my heart about 100 times by then,
okay.
and so it was always the same thing. I just go back to doing what I was doing. We have outreaches that will come to our neighborhood. So hey, meet me around the corner. I'll say that sinner's prayer with you. Don't worry. And I go do it, come back and start getting high or drinking, doing what I was doing. This wasn't one of those days. This day was different. This day, my mom tells me, thank God I just got out of camp. I just did time. I was 16. And so I go to church, and I'm supposed to go to my neighborhood later on that week, but I go to church. And when I go to church, that's when the transformation takes place. And from that point on, I called my homeboys and was like, hey, I miss you guys. I
But
wanted
wait,
to,
describe
oh,
that moment. Describe that moment.
yeah.
So you're in church, and all of a sudden, what happens?
So I'm praying, I'm saying the sinner's prayer, and I'm just, I'm saying this prayer that they're telling me to say, and I'm just trying to hurry up and get done with it. And then as I'm saying this prayer, just out of the blue, all of a sudden I just get this chill through my whole body, head to toe. And then all the thoughts of abandonment, growing up as a kid, all the hurts, all the pains, all those things, all those emotional things, they started coming to mind. And then it was almost like that feeling of being hugged by a parent, you know? It was like a spiritual hug by the Holy Spirit. That's the best way I could describe it. And he didn't let go of me. It was a hug that didn't let go. That's why I kept on crying. That's why I couldn't stop crying. Even when I tried to stop, couldn't stop. And I come to find that out later, but at the time I didn't know what was going on. But I wanted to find out what that was. And that's the reason why I started going to church and trying to understand who God was.
So you're crying in church. Church ends. You're
Church
still
ends.
crying.
Yeah.
Your dad comes and has a talk with you. You're trying to
Yeah.
figure out what this is.
Yeah. So we go out in the back actually after that, the church ends, and we go in the back, and me and my dad smoke a cigarette in the back. Hey, Pop, what was that? He said, hey, mijo, that was the Holy Spirit. I said, well, how come? And I'm talking to my dad, and I'm still like that, talking to him. And this is, time already went by. And he was like, I'd never seen it like that before, though, because I've seen the Holy Spirit touch people, but not like that. And I was like, man, and so I think it was because my dad was there, and he wasn't there for a lot of my life. My dad was my homeboy. He wasn't my dad. He showed me how to run the streets. He showed me how to be tough. He showed me how to talk, how to carry myself in certain situations around certain people. And it was my dad's advice that kept me alive throughout the years, to be honest. And on his deathbed, he apologized for saying, "Tell me, I'm sorry. I could have been a better dad to you. I showed you all the wrong things." I said, "Nah, what do you mean, Pop?" I said, "It's because of everything that you told me. You kept me alive, and now I could be a dad to my kids." I said, "So, I appreciate you for that." But yeah, anyways, little side note.
So no, powerful. So you now the Holy Ghost touches you
Yes,
and you distance yourself from the streets.
I did. Yeah,
So and you just stop showing up.
I did.
A year,
And
2 years?
probably about a year. And
Okay.
that was a long time, actually. In that world, that's a long time. And I was scared. I could say it now. At the time I was scared because I didn't know what was going to happen. You get checked for things like that. Getting checked means that you get jumped, and how long, however long they want,
And it could lead
whatever
to
it
death.
is, and it can lead to death. And I've seen it. I've seen it. And so I was scared about it.
You go ahead and now you follow this religious path for the next year.
Mhm.
And then one day the pastor does something that changes your world because now you're on the righteous path. You don't want to have anything to do with the gang life anymore. And then what happens is the ego of the pastor steps in because of something you did,
Yeah.
and that shifted your world.
Did. It did. Well, I was the youngest disciple in the church at the time. So, we go on outreaches. I go pray for houses, things like that, and so I got real close to my pastor to the point where he was able to speak into my life, and I gave him permission to. And one day, he I go to church and I have a girlfriend with me that I had met at the high school, and so I brought her to church with me, and I apparently he didn't like her, but I did. And so he tells me, "Hey, Ruben, uh, you know that girl that you came to church with? I don't want to see her here no more." And I said, "Well, I don't understand." And he was like, "That's not nobody that I want hanging around with you while you're discipling with me." And so I looked at him and I pretty much told him, I said, "Well, if that's the case, then I guess I don't need to be here no more." And so kind of that day I walked away. I think I walked away from church that day. That day I did walk away from church, and I remember sitting there in the back on a chair, kind of with my hands and with my face in my palms, and just and crying, telling God, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm gonna walk away now, forgive me, but I'm done, you know." And then I ended up going back to my neighborhood.
So the pastor, where church is supposed to be a place that accepts all,
Yeah.
they discriminated against this girl because of her upbringing, because of who she was. And you had been on your path of righteousness for the next year, and you had walked away from the gang life,
Mhm.
and that triggered you now, like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
So, that happens a lot where is with, pastors and in churches and stuff. They say they welcome all, but a lot of times, churches can be very cliquish and they can be very discriminatory. And I'm sorry, I just have to put it out there that they are, because some of the biggest cliques that do happen, and it's not a popular topic, but it happens in the churches. It's a very cliquish, and sometimes you're in the group, sometimes you're not. So this now caused you to walk away, not realizing that relationship was with God, not with the pastor or with that church, but you walk away and now you go back to the neighborhood
Yes.
and now you got to get checked.
Oh yeah.
How did that look? So
It
you go
hurt.
back after a year and what's up,
Yeah.
Ruben? Like, we got some unfinished business.
Yeah, basically it's kind of how the way it went. And I would like to say that, those were a ruthless bunch of guys too, So I was me even going over there, I was anticipating the worst, but I was almost embracing the worst too. I don't know why. It was just the way my mind was at the time. And so I went knowing that I was going to get hurt. How bad? We'll find out. And so I ended up pulling up, and you got some homeboys that will, "Hey, how you been? Haven't seen you in a while." Give you a hug, "Man, I'm glad you're here." But then you got the other ones standing off in the back, looking at you with that look like they're ready to pounce on you. So I said, "Okay, well, how is this going to go down?" So it was kind of a build up for a couple minutes, 20 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it no more. My anxiety just was too much at the time, and I just kind of threw it out there like, "Well, are we gonna take care of this or what? I already know what's happening." And so yeah, so that day I ended up getting checked that day, and because I've seen worse, I've seen how the way they've checked homeboys before. I was like, wow, this is gonna go down bad. But you know what? I was able to still stand afterwards. I was able to gather myself after it was all said and done. And you know what that made me feel at that point? Being that I was walking away from, keep in mind, I just left a church. I just left a family, a church family, right? And I felt abandoned by them, just like I just felt abandoned by my mom going to those foster homes. So now I'm back in my neighborhood again with my other family. And when they didn't beat me up that bad, when they didn't, because I mean, yeah, I wasn't looking the same afterwards, but I was still able to, compose myself and hang out. I actually felt love. I actually felt love right there, that they didn't hurt me as bad as I thought they were. be honest. And after that, that's when I was able to just go back, and now I'm 7 times worse, you know? Now I'm back there and I'm 7 times worse, and, you know, how that's like that church, you know, you go back in the world and you're 7 times worse. Yeah, it's kinda how it happened.
Wow. And as we start to bring this story to a close, your son's born,
Yes.
and then you realize this isn't for me anymore. And you learned how to love, you learned how to be a parent through a home economics class at
I
school.
did. Yes.
You learned how to love, you learned how to change a diaper,
I did, yeah,
you learned how to care for your baby because you had custody of it.
yeah. ROP
Tell us,
class.
ROP class, which now you're
Now I'm
teaching
an
at the
ROP
ROP
teacher.
teacher.
Yeah,
Full circle, you're giving back.
that's right.
So bring us to close with that moment of when you decided that the love of your son, you had more love for your son than you did for the gang and for you.
Yeah, you know, for those that are really in that lifestyle, for those that grew up in that lifestyle or, you know, like that, it's, it is a family. I mean, it is a family. It's a dysfunctional one, you know, but it's considered a family. And, I say that because, you know, with my son growing up as a little kid, I was 15 years old when I had him. And so I wanted my son to be everything that I was. And so, you know, I look back now, I really wanted something. I really didn't know what I wanted for myself, let alone for a little boy. But I knew that there was a change that needed to be made somewhere. I just didn't know how to make it. I didn't know what resources to turn to. I just knew that I needed to make a change somewhere. And it was it was my son, as it was me being a single father, because I was a single father. And it was my son just laying with him night after night, looking at him and saying, I need to do something different. I don't want him in foster homes, because I knew that I was living a lifestyle. If my mom can get me taken away, I can get my son taken away and put in foster homes. So I didn't want that for him. And so I was trying to figure out how to do it. And I just, you know, I really didn't know how, but that's the part again where I have to give God credit for for those times in my life, for sure.
So the streets that embraced not only you, but embraced your son,
That's right.
were
Those were his
also
aunts and
this,
uncles.
and that's the streets that took him also.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
What closing thoughts could you share with parents that are struggling with children that are stuck in that gang life, or things you could have done, maybe looking in retrospect, maybe things you could have done differently?
Everybody's looking for acceptance. Everybody's looking for family. Um, I think it takes a village to raise a kid. So therefore, I say as a community that is pulled together and that wants to see a change. I think that right there is where it's going to start. And at that point, you get the right minds together and the right support system that can bring change. All it really takes is just is faith and knowing that this is a movement. Healing is a movement. This is a movement that's taking place right now. There's a healing that's going on. And I want to be a part of that healing. I want to be a part of that movement. And it can come in different ways. You're doing it right now through this conversation, through your podcast. And there's people out there right now in the in the city councils that can help out There's mayors out there right now that want answers to help heal their communities. It's gonna take people like-minded that want change. That's what it's gonna take.
Is there one thing you could have told your son to shift his
Oh my
mindset
goodness, that's
away
deep,
from the kind
bro.
life?
That's deep. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of parents out there struggling.
I would have told my son I would have told my son not to worry about what anybody thinks. Don't worry about what they think. You worry about what you need to do. You worry about what matters to you. I could have said a lot of things to him that night, and I just didn't think he was gonna die. So I go back on that night to that's why that was a
Yeah.
hard question for me because I've replayed that. Like, what could I have said to him? What could I have done? And yeah, things happened the way that they did, but
Were you
yeah,
trying to get him out?
I was. I was trying to get him out of there. I was trying to call people and I was trying to figure out, but it just all happened so fast. And so my only thing was to just try to get down there myself to get him out of the situation.
What about, were you trying to get him out of that lifestyle?
Yes, I had the opportunity to move to Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii for a little over a year. I took my son with me. That boy met locals. He looks like a Samoan himself. He met locals and he was thriving out in Hawaii, loved it. And he came back to Cali, and that was his biggest mistake coming back. But yes, I got my son out of the neighborhood, and I told him, I said, "Look, this is what life's about. Paradise, you know, doing something positive, not having to worry about looking over your shoulder and who's who, carrying that weight with you. It's extra weight you don't need." And I really did try to get him to try to understand life from a different perspective than the street life. But he was just I don't know. I don't know if it was
That was his
destiny.
journey.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Stubborn.
I don't want to call it destiny because, but I don't know. I don't know what this is. I'll know when I leave this body and I'm able to reflect back on my life and that from that perspective, I'll probably know. Until then, I'm just gonna wait and just live life and try to be as positive as I can and help as many people as I can along the road.
I think the one, as we bring this to a wrap now, the one thing that you did say was you got him out of that environment.
I did.
And maybe that's something that other parents can explore as a possibility of getting them out of that environment. That could be another state, that could be another country, because then they start to envision life
Yes.
for what it truly is. Maybe
Yes.
he just didn't have enough time there to fully take in the beauty that life has to offer because he's young and he's still processing. But that's probably a takeaway is to take your son or daughter out of that environment and allow the change to happen.
Hmm. You know what? That's gonna help a lot of people right there. And you know what? Sometimes as parents though, think about it though. It's hard for somebody to just to pick up and move. And I think that's why a lot of the kids get stuck in between the cracks, because they can't just get up and move into another place. They gotta almost stay there. Their life's there. And for those that can get up and move and get your child out of a situation or or away from a group of kids that leading them down that road, if you could afford to do it, it's worth doing it. Start a new life, move somewhere else. But if you can't, find a support system. There are people around. There are people in the community that you can turn to that will help you. But it's just putting in the work of finding those people.
And it's not always about the finances because that's when you reach out to your relatives, your distant relatives, your
Mm,
second cousins, your third cousins.
yeah,
That's the time when you talk about community. It takes a community to raise a child.
yeah.
Well, that's when you reach out. It
I
doesn't.
like
We
that.
can't put obstacles of finance in the way because that's when you reach out to your aunts, cousins, sisters, friend. Hey, I
Yeah,
need you. I need
that's
you.
right.
And you send them. You ship them out. So
Wow.
wow.
Yeah.
Well. Thank you so much. Like I said, this has been another powerful episode of Fatherhood, Breaking the Toxic Cycle. And we had a chance to revisit Ruben's childhood in foster care, group homes, in the system, and his story of resilience as he struggled with not only gang life, but also having a child of his own and then watching the cycle repeat itself.